Website, you have an extensive list of recommended books. I've looked at it multiple times.
Yeah.
It's close to 100, I would say, and they're put into different categories, different genres. Are there any books on that list, or can you think of books that were introduced relatively early in your life? Some of the early exposures that have stood the test of time for you.
No, Huxley and Orwell, I would say. Solzhenitsyn as well. I read one day in the life of Ivan Denisovich when I was 13 or 14. That was one of the books Notley recommended. And so they certainly had an impact on me.
What was that impact, if you don't mind me following up?
Well, I started to think in broader terms as a consequence of being introduced to books like that, and started to think more seriously from a political perspective and a psychological perspective. I suppose it was my first introduction into serious thought, and it was extremely exciting. I mean, I read a lot of English literature from until I was about 25, and then I started reading nonfiction more once I started my graduate studies. But it opens up a world of ideas, and that was really exciting to me, incredibly exciting to me. So,
And the reason I'm asking so much about books is I am really fascinated by you, and I'm fascinated by everyone I have on the show. But the formation of your
well, that sort of decreases my pleasure at being the object of current fascination.
well, right now you're the most fascinating person in the world to me, and I uh, I find that books are a sort of a wellspring of value for listeners because it's something they can model very well, something that they can reach out for. So let's.
Yeah, well, people can get a whole education if they read those 100 books that I have on my website. I mean, you're not going to get an education in every discipline, but there's a whole education there under recommended books. That's been fun because lots of people have that's been an unbelievably popular list. It sells hundreds of books a month,
Oh, I
that
believe it.
list.
I believe it.
And people email me constantly and say, "Well, you introduced me to Dostoevsky. Thanks a lot. I've been they're so enthralled. If you're psychologically minded and you like the darkness to some degree, if you like gothic imagery and film noir and that sort of thing, Dostoevsky is an unbelievable treat, and he's so incredibly deep psychologically, enthralling. Crime and Punishment is an absolutely engrossing novel, as well as being a stunning work of philosophy.
Another name that shows up not once but several times in that list is Nietzsche, if I'm pronouncing that remotely correctly. I've always wondered.
I never know. I pronounce it like a Northern Albertan, Nietzsche. I know that's wrong. It's Nietzsche, I believe, but I never get it
So
right.
I've read you highlight, in a sense, or at least mention that Nietzsche pointed out that most morality is cowardice. So if we're making the leap from sort of this list of books to specific ideas, could you please elaborate on that?
Well, if you don't have the courage to commit a crime, it doesn't mean you're moral for not doing it. It just means you're afraid. You can see this, I suppose, to some degree in mob violence. People will riot because they don't think they'll get caught. And so they're not law abiding under normal circumstances because they're moral. They're law abiding because they're afraid of punishment. And so Nietzsche was very careful to distinguish mere obedience from morality. And he thought of obedience not always as a form of cowardice, because it can also be a source of discipline, but not committing a crime because you're too afraid to. I mean, it's probably better than committing a crime, but it doesn't speak to the essence of morality. And I've talked a fair bit about this, is that there's a certain utility in being able to do virtually anything and then to control yourself. And that's something I learned in part from Nietzsche, I suppose. The best people I've ever met are dangerous people, but they keep themselves in check. I have a close friend who's been real rock to me over the last couple of years. He was also born in northern Alberta. He came from a pretty poverty stricken background. Tough guy, worked in lead smelters and oil rigs. And he went to university, which is where I met him. And he was a social worker for a long time. And he's tough as nails. You know, he's worked with delinquents all over Canada, and he's a good disciplinarian. But he's also a very compassionate person, and he's a moral person as far as I'm concerned, because there's a real danger to him, but he keeps it under control. And he's not a coward. He's not afraid. He's not weak.
How do